Okay, folks, I've been showing you how to look at the Hive AIDS exposure test and how it's based and what it's based on in numbers and sites that provided you in previous episodes of this. The point about the Hive exposure test is it was developed based on Swaziland numbers. Swaziland is the country with the highest rate of AIDS in the world. There's a big problem with that, though. They are generally infected with Hive 2, not Hive 1. Most of the rest of the world is infected with Hive 1. And the reason I say this is a problem is when the number of people with HSV started to decline. HSV is a type of growing sore. The number of Hive cases started to decline in Swaziland by a significant margin. I think it was like 43%, if I remember right. That's a significant telltale sign. If you look in the United States, where Hive 1 is the predominant AIDS maker, then you look at African Americans, which are black males, only 1 in 100 have Hive that have HSV. But in Swaziland, amongst the general adult population, both men and women, 3 out of every 4 HSV patients has Hive. Think of that. That's 75% of their adult population that's infected with HSV also has Hive. That's interesting. Now let's go do a little history of the United States and Hive and HSV. HSV broke out in the United States in epidemic proportions in 1974. It's estimated people can live 7 to 10 years without even knowing they have AIDS. Excuse me, knowing that they've been Hive infected. AIDS is pretty easy to identify once it starts. If you figure 7 years from 1974, that's 1981. Guess what happened in 1981? The first AIDS patient in America. Big problem. Now, let's run back forward in time. In 2003, there was a study done by the World Health Organization on HSV, just by itself. In Africa, there was a 66.7% infection rate with HSV. 55% men and 70% women. They did another global HSV study, and in Africa, they didn't break it down by gender. At least what I saw wasn't broken down by gender. But the combined total was 31%. That's less than half what they had in 2003. Then guess what? In 2010, in Swaziland, the number of new infections started declining. The number of new infections started to decline. And the number of HIV patients started to decline. But the number of HSV patients was just dropped right out of the bottom of the bucket. It's like somebody punched a hole in your gas tank, and all your gas went out of it. That makes me think of why I went with this test is the fact that it's quite clear that HSV has a direct connection with Hive 2 spreading. Swaziland is a case study that will not go away. As soon as the number of HSV cases started to decline, the number of new Hive infections started to decline. Now, what happens if Hive 2 gets out of Africa? Look at the United States. 45% of the black American males, that most of which come from Africa, 45% of them have HSV. That's a huge potential hit. If Hive 2 gets out of Africa, it could kill a lot of Americans, particularly black Americans. And Hive 2 doesn't care if you're a man or woman. 50%, no, I think it was 51% of the casualties in Swaziland now are women. That's over half of the people infected are women. Think about that for a second. Over half of them are women. That's a major problem. And HIV-2 is the predominant HIV virus in southern and southwestern Africa. That's the reason I made this test up. I'm not trying to stop HIV-1. There's plenty of medications for that. What I'm trying to stop is the spread of HIV-2. If it gets out of Africa, a lot of people are going to be toast. Well, I thought I would make this explanation as to why I told you probably ahead of when we really needed to know, but the evidence is there, and I decided to present it to anybody willing to listen. HIV-2, if it gets out of southern and southwestern Africa, could kill tens of millions of women and men. Not just your sex workers, not just your intravenous drug using women, but any woman exposed to HSV. And by 2014, in some cities in the United States, the percentage of groin sores that were caused by HSV-2 had declined to 30%. And 70% of them was caused by HSV-1, which is normally what you call cold sores on your mouth. But oral sex can cause it to go to your groin. But it's predominantly cold sores in your mouth. It normally affects this part right here, this thing. Yet now we're finding in some U.S. cities, large numbers of people are getting cold sores in the groin. Where used to you would expect HSV-2 to be there. Now you get HSV-1 there. And that's unusual. Usually that's not the case. Well, until AIDS came around, it wasn't the case. Now we know it is the case, and it's slowly becoming more and more so the case. Well, that's a little bit of an explanation of why I've been saying what I've been saying and everything. Just remember, if we don't nip this in the bud and HSV gets if the body gets infiltrated through HSV sores that bleed during sex or whatever, how it's transmitted that way, and HIV-2 gets more widely spread, we could see tens of millions of dead. More than we're seeing now. Well, Thomas Wills out here. Have a good one.